Godfrey.
The first Elden Lord.
He's a pinnacle of strength and ability and discipline. Godfrey's achievements throughout the story is well known. Also well displayed in my opinion, because honestly we learn more about Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, than Radagon, the King Consort, the second Elden Lord. But I would say Radagon actually plays more of a story in terms of when we get into the Lands Between. But that's off topic. We're going to talk about Lord Godfrey and a character analysis that also leads to more of a masterclass in terms of mindset, leadership, strength, and discipline. Also, willpower. Godfrey is a good representation of strength and willpower. Honestly, it's an understatement saying he's a pinnacle of strength in terms of humanity's strength. Now, let's go into who Godfrey actually is. Like I said before, Godfrey is the first Elden Lord. Excuse me, gotta get some chapstick in. But Godfrey is the first Elden Lord, also the husband of Queen Marika. When the Earth Tree started, he had the Age of Plenty, from what I know. And he also was there way before. He was Hoarah Loux. That's his like true self, persona, anything like that. So basically Hoarah Loux and Godfrey the same person. So I'll refer to them as such depending on what event or something I'm talking about, or what trait I'm really talking about, and which one defines it more. But yes, he is also was the leader of the armies back then, the armies of gold, the champion of conquest. And the biggest event that is for Godfrey, from what we know in terms of that influences us, is that he was banished and became the first Tarnish. Basically, the Tarnish is what your main character is. Your character, you. He comes back as Godfrey again. Then you battle him, and then he becomes Hoarah Loux because he kills Sarash, I guess. But Sarash and him are basically one person. Basically grafting a beast regent on his back to basically become Godfrey. But Hoarah Loux embraces the raw warrior spirit. So just to rough down and give you a little summary of who Godfrey is. Godfrey is the first Elden Lord, husband of Queen Marika, and conqueror for the Golden Order. Then the Hoarah Loux is the raw warrior spirit of him, basically a Highlander before he became Godfrey, and then after still has Highlander blood. Basically, he's the pinnacle of it. I think he's the only bloodline I know that actually uses the storm pretty well in terms of like in the Lands Between, because obviously the Horns and all those people and stuff like that use the storm and stuff like that, but he's the only person I know that actually used that. Although I don't think he ever uses it though, so pretty lore complications there. But we're not here for that. But we're gonna talk about Hoarah Loux's mindset as well, in terms of how he carries himself and how you could take inspiration from both sides, and also how you can disregard some of the stuff, because it has some pros and cons. There is some big cons to Godfrey and Hoarah Loux, or Godfrey, the first Elden Lord. So we're going to talk about Godfrey's mindset. Godfrey's mindset, before we start, Godfrey's mindset and Hoarah Loux's mindset does overlap because they are the same person, but I'll distinguish both of them for certain categories and certain key points I bring up. But Godfrey's mindset is what you should really look at and take, like that saying and that idol, that like saying and mindset, like Bruce Lee, like I said for the Sir Ansbach video, how you take what's good about something and add it to your own and discard the bad things. Or for you, anything could be good and anything could be bad depending on the person and depending who you are. But that's what you want to do with Godfrey's mindset, as before with Sir Ansbach. But Godfrey's mindset, the key traits you have to really look at is his discipline. Godfrey has a sense of discipline. A lot of people see him as a barbarian, which he is a barbarian, but he never really describes himself as a barbarian. He always describes himself as a warrior. And to be a warrior, you need discipline, a strong sense of discipline. Not only that, he chooses discipline over comfort. If you could tell about certain implications about certain characters, for example, I don't know if it's his first son, but one of his legitimate sons, I say in quotations because there's actually a good chance that Godwyn the Golden is not his son. But let's talk about Godwyn. There's a lot of implications showing that Godwyn is actually not, fully disciplined, especially when it comes to his own character. There's a lot of different things going on with his bloodline and the golden lineage that supposedly is descended from Godwyn, or not Godwyn. Well, yeah, Godwyn, but Godfrey. You could tell that Godwyn has a sense of like sleeping around. Basically, his bloodline seems very all over the place. When it comes to Mohg or Morgott, Morgott. Why I say Morg? Mohg and Morgott, you can tell their bloodline strong, solidified. Just straight up, you could tell they're the descendant of Godfrey. Obviously, we never meet Godwyn, and maybe Godwyn had a little, Godwyn had a little bit of blood from Godfrey. Who knows? But I think he's more of a alchemy. I think Godwyn's more of an alchemy mix-up of artificial life. But let's not talk about Godwyn. Godwyn's a whole completely different subject, and it's honestly hard to create a video about him. But maybe we will attempt to in the future. But why I was talking about that is because Godfrey instills a sense of discipline, and it seems to carry over for his children. Although we don't really know for Mohg, but for Morgott, it has that discipline where it's discipline over comfort. Hello, ladies and gents. This is actually the second recording session. I did go to the store, so just a few snacks. But we're gonna talk about the next category. I talked about discipline over comfort. I don't know if I finished it or not, but we're gonna move over to the next category, which is relentless willpower. And willpower is a great asset and trait to have depending on the character. Now, Godfrey was a warrior, but he was also many other things. The Lord of the Battlefield, and that might be correlate to a warrior, but it also correlates to a set of like a ruler image. He had relentless willpower to the point where he had a whole conquest for all these great warriors and champions from many different pantheons before he was even Godfrey too. When he was Hoarah Loux, he defeated Sarash, and then I'm pretty sure Sarash offered service to it, and then the whole Godfrey thing happened, and then they got grafted together, and now he's Beast Regent and stuff like that. But he also fought many people. I also believe that he invaded Fair Mazula. Fair Mazula is the home of the ancient dragons, so I'm pretty sure he invaded Fair Mazula. And then he also led the battles outside of the lands between on the March of the Charnish. So he definitely have relentless willpower, and relentless willpower is a great trait to have, even if you're not a warrior yourself. It can even relate to warrior traits as well, because I'm a mixed martial artist, and if you do mixed martial arts, having relentless willpower is the greatest asset you can ever attain, especially in mixed martial arts or competitively, or even when it comes to time to when the lights go high and everything like that, and things really the bucket gets kicked over, and all these crazy things happening, and God forbid, knock on wood, God forbid that you actually need to use your strength to protect your family or something like that. So relentless willpower can provide in any situation, honestly. And we're gonna move to the next trait, which is embracing struggle. Elden Ring has a sense of embracing struggle. Almost the whole story is about embracing struggle in some way or some form. But Godfrey has really embraced struggle, mainly because his primal nature. Godfrey has a duality when it comes to nature: his Lord self and his primal self. I honestly think his primal self is his true self. Although I believe you have a sense of nature, but you also have a sense of action. So your actions really do define you. Just like we're talking about Lord Godfrey, technically he is also Hoarah Loux. But he was embracing struggle when it came to his duality in terms of his nature, and a lot of people do struggle with that. A lot of people do struggle with that sense of nature or that sense of duality. And embracing struggle is honestly very good and very bad depending on the situation. But most of the time, I would say about 80% of the time is pretty good, because you're pushing past your limits, pushing beyond limits that you set for yourself. or you believe that is natural limits to yourself. It's really not. You can really prevail in any category, and this is one of the categories of embracing struggle to surpass your nature. Is honestly one of the biggest pros you can have in anything, especially when it comes to business, or it comes to your own mindset, or it comes to self-growth especially, because a lot of self-growth actually stem from natural stigmata and natural sense of nature and sense of your own individual reality. What I mean by that is exactly that sometimes, most of the time, mental disorders and stuff like that actually come from our own emotions, and they come from our own how we view ourselves, our own point of view, our own sense of pride and egotistical and all that stuff. We do inflict damage on ourselves, especially mentally, and embracing struggle is going to help you get out of that or help prevent it. Obviously there's a lot more to it depending on what you're actually talking about, but in the rough guideline, that's very true. Now, the last thing I want to talk about when it comes to his key traits is that Godfrey is one man with a mission. He is one man with a mission. There's one thing we can show in anything he has done, whether he was Godfrey, Hoarah Loux, whether he helped Queen Morgott become a god, or whether he fought against the ancient dragons at Fair Missoula, or when he led the march out of the Tarnish, or he led the march out of the lands between with the Tarnish, when he was fighting these many battles, when he was, like, you know, being the first Elden Lord. Well, the first. Placidusek is considered the first Elden Lord, but when he was being the first Elden Lord, there was one thing, even when he comes to his own duality of nature, for example, his barbarian self or his warrior self, like I guess they're both warriors in their own sense, but Hoarah Loux and Godfrey, one thing that stays really clear is purpose. He had a clarity of purpose. Godfrey, Hoarah Loux, had a sense of purpose 100% of the way. He never lost himself when it came to his purpose. Now, we don't know any of the nitty-gritty details about certain events and stuff like that, so, you know, he could have got doubts and dismotivated or anything like that. You know, everyone's humans in a certain degree, especially when it comes to Elden Ring. But, you know, from what we know, he always had a sense of clarity of purpose. He always tested himself against worthy foes. He always knew that he wanted to fight. He wanted battle. He was the lord of the battlefield. There was no sense of denying that, or no sense of discomfort towards that goal or anything like that. And then even when he achieved that goal, he strived higher. So let's take a step back and realize what is actually the real life applicants to this, the real life applications to this. One is self-growth. Godfrey and Hoarah Loux, no matter where the point in the standpoint, or no matter where you want to pin his story at, whether that be when he was Hoarah Loux, when he was with the horn set, or when he was Godfrey in terms of the Age of Plenty, or when he was on the March of the Tarnish outside the lands between, he was always evolving in some way, whether that be his craft as a warrior, or whether that be his lordship, or whether that be him returning back to his primal nature and leading the clans of the Badlands, or establishing his own clan, establishing new families and new ties. He was always evolving. He was never sitting in the same spot for a certain amount of time. And even when he did, usually because other people stopped him from evolving, whether that be Queen Morgott or anything of the sort. He was always evolving. So self-growth, always evolving. Another thing will be for business, you know, because my channel is about business. So we're going to talk about Godfrey, how he's basically a conqueror. He's a world conqueror. And that has a sense of business to a certain degree. He built the Golden Order. No matter how you look at it, you know, Radagon and Queen Morgott played a big part. Everyone else also played a big part. The demigods and other smaller people in the story and stuff like that. But he was the first Elden Lord for the Golden Order. You know, Placidusek was the first, but he was the first for the Golden Order. He built the foundations of that empire. Building the foundations of that empire requires a lot of skills, traits, and lordship. You know, I know he had the Beast Regent Sarash on his back, but Sarash, you know, I guess Sarash and Hoarah Loux are the same person in my eyes. So, you know, they both built, rebuilt, built, and continue to expand their empire. And that requires a sense of dedication and require a sense of traits that relate to lordship. And lordship can has sense of leadership, you know, and that leadership can be spread into all categories, whether it be school or career or college or, you know, internship or, you know, relationship. All the sense of leadership can prevail in any category and really show its true colors when you follow the example of the Lord Godfrey. Another thing was his true I guess implication is his mindset. True power comes from knowing that who you are and refining it relentlessly. That is what makes Godfrey special. Now, if you quick disclaimer, I am looking for my notes, as I always say at each video. I just like to say it to really like tell you guys that, you know, I'm over here trying to get you the right things, because if I was just going off my own script, you know, this is my script, I created it, nothing like that. But if I was just going off, if I went off script, we will be here for a long time. And the last video was 30 minutes. I actually did not want it to be 30 minutes. I tried to reach 20 and under, so that's the goal of this video, although I think we are gonna pass 20 minutes over, but that's a little off topic. Let's go back into the mindset of Lord Godfrey. Like I said before, I'm gonna restate what I have here on my notes. Is true power comes from knowing who you are and refining it relentlessly. 100% true. Like I said, Godfrey had the clarity of purpose, and that clarity of purpose was led to willpower, led to lordship, led to strength, led to him being the lord of the battlefield, or whatever you're looking for: status, money, power, title, anything like that. Oh, status and title are the same thing, but, you know, image. All those are not things I recommend chasing fully. You know, it can be a byproduct of what you want. Like I said, Hoarah Loux had a sense of purpose when it came to the battlefield. He was a warrior. He was a champion. He wanted this, and he got that. You know, he wanted battle. He was crazy. But there is a sense of crazy when it comes to everybody, right? The most successful people always have a sense of disconnect from regular people, is because they have this weird sense of craziness to them. No matter how you look at it, it doesn't matter how calm it is, you know, no matter how much they have that sriracha on their back, they have this weird nature where you can tell they're a little crazy. But that's a little off topic as well. But those are the real life implications. And for this first category, now we're going to go into a little subcategory where I talk about Godfrey's power and presence, and how you can apply that to your own real life. What makes him powerful? Obviously, he's extremely strong, warrior, Highland warrior, tarnish, first Elden Lord, all that stuff. Everyone, that's the surface level. We're going to talk about his controlled rage. That's the first category. His controlled rage. Not mindless, but intentional. You know, when he like goes into the second phase during his boss fight, he rips his shirt off. Well, people who never played Elden Ring before will have like, it'll be like, what the frick? You ripped the shirt off. But yeah, he ripped his shirt off. And he called himself warrior. But you never see him like, he had this bestial instinct. Don't get me wrong. He had that bestial instinct. He had that barbarian instinct. He had that strong, primal instinct. But he was never like straight up like like a monster, or like a straight up beast. Like this is straight up like mindless beast, you know, like a bear attacking or something like that. He was never like that. He had a sense of coordination. He had a sense of intentional combat, and that's what really makes him different. He was not mindless. But it was intentional. He released his nature on purpose. He knew what he was getting himself into. Another thing that makes him powerful is his leadership. He led the armies of the Earth Tree. Pretty self-explanatory. Led the armies of the Earth Tree. That requires a sense of leadership. That requires a sense of admiration from his men and obviously his soldiers. And then the next thing we want to talk about is fearless confrontation. He never backed down from a fight. I'm pretty sure he never backed down from a fight. And there's so many stories about him in these battles and all these crazy things that happened to him. I'm 100% sure that he never backed down from a fight. Now, this has some pros and cons. Obviously, you want to be strategic about your fights, and, you know, fights can translate to many other things, whether it be business or anything like that. You know, you don't want to choose the right outcomes, or you don't want to choose the bad outcomes. You want to usually choose the outcomes that benefit you and all this other stuff. So take it with a grain of salt for this category, the fearless confrontation. You know, that's what makes them powerful, and you can use that to your own advantage, but make sure you play your cards carefully. But, you know, one thing you want to talk about is actually pain. Godfrey handles pain very well. He never ever shows a sense of, you know, not a sense of like, oh, he doesn't show his pain. He pretty much show his pain in many different things. For example, when he enters his boss arena, he's like holding his son Morgott. He's like, oh, Morgott, it's been a while. You know, sure, that you could tell that it was a sense of pain when it came to him. But you know, he never let his pain control him. For sure, never let it control him. He also showed his pain. I think to become someone who's powerful, you must also show, you know, your pain. A lot of people like to say, oh, you know, you hide your pain and hide your suffering. No. Being a strong person requires you to actually show that you're suffering, that you're pain. But it also allows you to prevail over them. So, let's talk about the real life reflections when it came to these three categories. The three categories I was talking about is controlled rage, leadership, fearless confrontation, and then the bonus category of pain. But let's talk about the real life reflections, as I said before, which is to channel your inner rage from motivation and not destruction. You notice that when Godfrey releases his rage and his primal instincts and all that stuff, it never is a sense of destruction towards it. It has a sense of like motivation, a sense of discipline, a sense of like controlled environment. He knew what he was doing, and you can apply that. You can apply that to almost anything. That sense of controlled environment, that sense of motivation, basically channels your inner rage from motivation, not destruction. The next category we're going to talk about is to lead with clarity. When you lead with clarity, it gives the people that are following you a sense of clarity as well. For example, your teams if you're running a business, or example, your projects in school when you have a team members and all those other stuff, or your clubs, or you know, work or career, you know, whether you're in a management position or you know you're doing something, anything that revolves around you leading. If you lead with a sense of clarity, the people that follow you will also have a sense of clarity, but also a sense of strength. And strength is what you need, especially when it comes to the nitty-gritty stuff of different teams and projects and all this other crazy thing that comes with leadership. Strength and clarity. Another category we're going to talk about is face your fear, don't avoid it. Exactly. Godfrey always had fearless confrontation. And now, like I said, take that with a grain of salt. But you should always face your fear and don't avoid it. Unless it's something really traumatic. And even then, you should try to prevail over it. You know, you don't want it to hold you back. But growth happens through conflict, not comfort. And that's 100% true. If there's one thing you can take from this video, conflict is how growth in evolution happens. That's how you evolve as a character, as a person. Not through comfort. But that's the real life reflections for this category. Now we're going to talk about some common questions that come up with Lord Godfrey. The first common question would be, isn't Lord Godfrey just a barbarian? No. And yes, you're technically right, but you're technically not wrong. Barbarian is a word that you really would use for, I guess, the sense of like a Viking, or like, you know, barbarian was mainly used. A lot of people think of barbarian as a word they use to describe Vikings or people who are more tribal. So barbarian is the wrong word, but you're not here for a history lesson. But a brute, I guess, is the correct word. But no, I think he was more of a strategic leader. Sure, that came from Beast Regent Sarash and all those other things, but he's a warrior at the end of the day. He was the lord of the battlefield. That comes with a sense of strategic leadership. Doesn't matter how you look at it. You can be the biggest brute out there, but if you're the lord of the battlefield and fought countless enemies and have this tremendous amount of experience, you have a sense of strategic leadership. It doesn't matter how you look at it. It doesn't matter how beast-like you are. He had a sense of experience throughout generations, throughout decades, and throughout anything. He's been around for a long time. So, it doesn't matter how you look at it. He had a sense of strategic leadership. And he had a sense of duality as well, control and chaos. So it almost had a sense of balance to him. But you know, there's a bunch of things that can come from a brute. I would say he's a brute, but not in the way you're thinking of, like, you know, straight up barbarian. Oh, barbarian is the wrong word, but straight up brute, mindless, you know, ogre type, like a big stick bonk. But no, he's not like that. He has plenty traits that make him who he is. But the second question would be, how does this relate to normal people? As I said before, there's a bunch of things that relate to them. Different traits that you can pick up and apply to your own thing, whether that be career, school, mixed martial arts, you know, anything, passions, hobbies, purpose, you know, there's a bunch of things. But what I have here is that you don't need a crown. You need the ownership of your path. Or ownership over your path. Well, in the lore implications, you know, Queen Marika could have been using them. I'm pretty sure they had some type of like, you know, relationship, although the seduction from the DLC and all this other stuff. The people who don't really know Elden Ring too much would be like, what the frick are you talking about? But I'm pretty sure if you're watching this video, unless you're like a big fan of me, I'm pretty sure you're a big fan of Elden Ring and Lord Godfrey yourself too. But ownership over your path. No matter how you look at it, Godfrey had his story is about a sense of resilience, a sense of willpower, a sense of strength, and comeback energy. Whether that be comeback energy in terms of like his battles, you know, I'm pretty sure he has some tough battles, or him returning back to the lands between and doing the final showdown. That takes a sense of energy that a lot of people do not have. But what does his transformation mean? It comes from noble Elden Lord King, wherever you want to describe it, to primal beast. Basically embracing his full self. And embracing your full self doesn't have to exactly mean bad things. A lot of people like to hide their true self, but sometimes embracing your true self and sometimes changing your true self. A lot of people like to say, oh, don't change your true self. But sometimes you need to. Sometimes, you know, you can't get the things you want by being like that. And Hoarah Loux and Godfrey is a good example of that. But you know, he never, Hoarah Loux and Godfrey never let that stop them. He let them refine and direct them in a sense of passion and clarity of purpose, and that's something you should always strive for and always try to achieve. Now we're going to talk about tips to become like Lord Godfrey, or tips to acquire some of his mindset and acquire some of his traits and acquire some of his energy, his raw primal energy to use for your own well-being. Main thing I'm gonna talk about before I go into my list, because I don't have it on my list, but one thing you gotta really look for is that if you're really trying to come closer to Godfrey, you must understand what a warrior is. And I highly recommend to, you know, give me a minute. I'm gonna go get the belt. Oh, that sounds weird, but you know, I'm gonna go get the belt. Hold up. There you go. I am a blue belt, so I'm a blue belt in jiu-jitsu, mixed martial arts, all that stuff. But, you know, here it is. In order to really understand what a warrior is, you must have a sense of combat, battle, no matter how you look at it. And the best way to ever reach the bridge in terms of the modern day, because, you know, you can't be a warrior and go conquer the damn world, you know, not anymore, but is mixed martial arts. If you want to understand the traits that Hoarah Loux and Godfrey had, mixed martial arts is one of the best ways to actually embrace those things. Because if a mixed martial artist looked at Godfrey's character, he'll understand that a lot of his character actually stems from battle. And battle gives you a sense of traits that really you can't find anywhere else. Like I said, Bruce Lee, Mike Tyson, Muhammad Ali, all these amazing people. And of course you have the more modern day people, the modern champions, like the UFC champions, the boxing champions, all those are the modern people. My favorite being Mighty Mouse, one of the greatest mixed martial arts legends ever. But to actually understand a lot of the traits, I highly recommend to do mixed martial arts. Now, if it's not for you, then it's not for you. But once you do mixed martial arts, you'll become a sense of like that warriorship, that being a warrior. But you'll start to understand the small things about Godfrey, and you'll be like, you just acquired them over your journey of a mixed martial artist. But that's a little off topic. Let's go back into what I have here to become like Lord Godfrey. One is build discipline. Train your mind and body daily. Small habits, consistent pressure. Really good. Whether that be passions for working out or lifting weights and all this other stuff. Really good. Training your mind and body, you know, no matter how you look at it, Godfrey trained his mind, even though a lot of people like to call him a brute, you know, he's a muscle man, whatever you want to call him. But his experience trained his mind. His experience sharpened his mind. But another thing is to accept exile. When you're down, see it as see it as your proving ground, because a lot of people can disregard you. You know, Godfrey doesn't really have that, but you know, when he became tarnished, a lot of people disregarded him, even though he was the first Elden Lord. But when you're down, show it as your proving ground to yourself, because a lot of people can feel when you get discarded and a lot of bad things happen to you, and a lot of people see you in a different light now as they did before, it can really hurt somebody. So use it as your proving ground for your own well-being. And you can do that, you get a sense of confidence that will stay with you forever. Another thing is your moral code. Godfrey had a warrior's code, you know, his battle and all this other stuff, Lord of the Battlefield, all that crazy thing, the implications of that, the clarity of that purpose, of that idea, of that moral code. Once you have a moral code, you get a sense of clarity or purpose, but you must believe in it. If you don't truly believe in that moral code or any code, it doesn't matter what it is, any code, you would not have that sense of clarity or purpose. Obviously, you're going to have to convince yourself, and the only way to truly convince yourself is through experience. Another thing is pursue worthy challenges. Playing small, stop playing small, basically. Don't play small. You know, you can start off small, get the small wins, but, you know, when you, truly to grow, the challenge must be in order to truly grow, the challenges must get stronger and harder, and more difficult over time. You can't keep doing the same thing over and over and over and expect you to grow. Now, you can do repetitive actions and get better at something, but in order to truly grow, you must test yourself at the biggest stage each time. The next thing will be balance, control, and chaos. Everyone has this. Don't suppress your ambition, but channel it. But also don't let it consume you. A lot of people let their ambitions consume them. A lot of them let their ambitions die. A lot of them let their ambitions get lazy, you know. For example, a great example would be like the self-help, self-growth type thing. A lot of people want to do that. They watch motivational things all the time, and that's all they do. Consume motivational stuff, and that's it. They let their ambition get lazy, and then some people let their ambitions die, and some people let their ambitions consume them, doing things that they usually wouldn't do. That goes against their own nature. But let's do a quick summary in terms of what I was actually talking about for the tips to become like Lord Godfrey. The first one is build discipline. The second one is accept exile. The third one is define your code, whether that be a warrior's code, a moral code, or anything like that. The next one will be pursue worthy challenges. Don't play small. And then the last one is the balance, control, and chaos. All very good points. Now, let's talk about a rough category in terms of what it means for the channel. What I mean by that is like what I represent for the channel and what the channel actually represents. We're going to talk about two categories, business and self-growth. Business. How does Godfrey relate to business? A lot of people will see that it's almost extremely hard to connect the two, but let's talk about Godfrey and how he connects to business. Leadership, obviously, we want the whole rant about leadership, but let's talk about him as a persona, and him as a character. No matter how you look at it, experience is king, and Godfrey is the pinnacle of that. Godfrey is the pinnacle of strength and experience. No matter how you look at it, he is the most experienced warrior that has come in the lands between and even before that. So experience. Use experience to sharpen your business, no matter what it is, no matter how small, how big, how complex, how easy, difficult, doesn't matter. Experience is king. There's Godfrey and business, the one connection you can bring between those two is experience. Experience. Another thing would be self-growth, evolution. Like I talked about this earlier, roughly. Evolution. He's never, ever, like, in a sense of a comfort level where he's just sitting around. You almost get that with Radagon, but Radagon has a different sense of strength and a different sense of clarity. But Radagon's age is a lot more, I would say, disconnected than Godfrey. So you could take that with a grain of salt and see how, which one you view. I always view Godfrey as the better Elden Lord, because Radagon, no matter how you look at it, Radagon had his issues and had his problems. We'll talk about Radagon in the future, but Radagon, he has his strength. Don't get me wrong, he has his strengths, but he also has a lot of cons to him too. But yeah, evolution. So let's talk about another category. This category we're going to talk about is Godfrey's flaw and dark side. Yes, the cons to Godfrey's mindset, the cons to Godfrey's character and his mindset, and how it can apply to you. Another thing is potential pitfalls. We're going to talk about how Godfrey's image and what traits you bring from her can actually cause some bad things. Every mindset, persona, character, traits you give, what the hell I'm talking about? Brain fart. you acquire will have some pros and cons. There's pros and cons to each situation, each trait, each characteristics, each attribute. It doesn't matter. That's just how the world works. There's always two sides to everything, duality. But let's talk about the first one, which is over attachment to identity. He struggled with purpose once the conquest ended. Yes, once that whole thing ended, Godfrey lost the hue in his eye. Not because he got grace taken away, but I'm pretty sure if he stuck around, he wouldn't be the same man he was before. Another thing is suppressing himself too long. When he suppressed himself for so long, when he became Hoarah Loux again in the Lands Between, and no matter how you look at it, he became a warrior once more outside the Lands Between, but he never took Siraj off his back. So yes, he was Hoarah Loux outside the Lands Between, but he was also still Godfrey in a sense because he has Siraj on his back. But when he releases his bestial nature, his primal nature, it emerges so violently. And yes, it was intentional, and yes, it's controlled, but honestly, he suppressed himself for so long. That's probably why he lost to us in the Elden Ring story and when we fought him. Honestly, I guarantee you, if he came back as Hoarah Loux, and honestly, the biggest thing I was really thinking about, this is a little off topic, just for lore reasons and me being a fan of Elden Ring. When we see the intro of him in the beginning in the cinematics, basically, it was like Hoarah Loux, and he looked like Hoarah Loux, like, he wasn't wearing a shirt or anything. Okay, now that come off as weird, but he looked like Hoarah Loux, but he still has Siraj on his back. I really wonder if I really wish we got a Hoarah Loux and Siraj, like, combination of the two. Damn motorcycle just passed by. But I really wish we got that, honestly. We could have saw Hoarah Loux and Siraj as the same person, like in terms of like how the cinematic was, but I'm not really sure how that'll play out. And I wish like that's how it started. Like, I know he was Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, and then he returned back and he was gonna stand before the Elden Ring and all that other stuff, but I really wish it was a little different. But that's a little off topic. Let's talk about the next category, which is single focus mindset. Great for battle, bad for peace. You can really take that very self-explanatory. It really is self-explanatory. When you have a single-minded pursuit of something, once you acquire it or once it's gone, whether that may be changes over time or anything like that, you kind of lose that sense of purpose. So make sure you avoid that. How to avoid them, which is I have that here, which leads to the next category, how to avoid them, all this stuff. Have multiple sense of purposes, not just one mission. Very self-explanatory. Check your emotional health regularly. Don't suppress it. Very self-explanatory. Evolve your mindset with seasons of life. Warrior and youth, strategic and maturity. This usually comes from experience. So, pretty self-explanatory. So, I'm going to leave you with some closing thoughts, right? I have here that Godfrey was just not a warrior. He was a metaphor for your strength, your losses, your returns. Study him, not just to win fights, but to win yourself. Pretty self-explanatory. Now, is there anything I want to say before this video ends? This video is going to be tremendously long. About Godfrey. Godfrey is my favorite character. And if you didn't know, because I'm pretty sure I'm gonna show a clip of him, like, I have an intro clip where it says like, oh, Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, and he stomped his foot down. But this is Godfrey. This is Godfrey. And he's a big representation. This is Siraj. I don't know if you guys can see pretty well. The lion on his back is Siraj. He's Godfrey. Godfrey is my favorite character. And he's a big inspiration for me in many different categories. And I connect with him on a fundamental level because I am a mixed martial artist. And that's the last thing I want to leave you guys here. Mixed martial arts gives you a sense of traits as a warrior, as a teacher, as a student, and I highly recommend it. One of the best things I've ever done in my whole life, and would never regret doing it at all, no matter what comes from it. So mixed martial arts, you get closer to Godfrey, and you get closer to embodying what actually a warrior is. And that's the last thing I'm gonna leave you guys with. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoy. This video was tremendously long. I'm gonna edit and figure out and make it more smooth, basically. But Godfrey is an amazing character, and I just touched the surface on him. Just like Sir Ansbach, I just touched the surface on both of them because how you look at it, Elden Ring lore is so expansive and it can be viewed in many different ways. People see Godfrey differently than I do. So one day we can, 100% agree on is that he was a true warrior, in my opinion. So, you know, I hope you guys enjoyed this character analysis once again. Thank you guys for the support lately, and I hope you guys enjoy. If you guys missed the last video about Sir Ansbach, the video will be right here. One thing about this video though is that it has sunlight, so sorry, forgive me that it has sunlight, but still a really good video to put in the background. So, thank you guys for watching. Check out the Sir Ansbach video. Godrick the Graphic. He is one of the more interesting characters in the game because he's pretty important to the story, but also seems to have that atmosphere where he's like not important. When you really think about it, he really is one of the big major keystones of the story in any way you can think about it. Whenever it comes to the Tarnished story, that he's one of the first major bosses to ever be in the Elden Ring in terms of your story, like, oh, you're gonna have to fight him at Stormveil Castle, or just in terms of the story that he somehow has a connection to Godwyn and Godrick, or not Godrick, Godfrey. It's just like, it makes you really think, like, is Godrick character something? I think we're missing key components of his character, or we're just overlooking him. But one thing we're not overlooking is that Godrick has qualities and traits that we should not follow in life. Godrick has many different qualities, as I said, that just don't align with anything you could do. And of course, some of them could some of them can, you know, be used in more positive and good ways. But the way Godrick does it is very, very, very negative in any way possible. And we're going to talk about that right now. As always, we're going to start with who Godrick is. Godrick the Graphic is one of the first major bosses you fight against in the Elden Ring game. But also, he's pretty much important to the story because right when you come out of the whole like tutorial area and you walk out and you meet White Mask Vari, he's one of the first characters you actually learn about. You hear about Godrick the Graphic, Godrick this, Godrick that, everywhere. It doesn't matter if exploring Limgrave and you go talk to Ken of Height, you learn about Godrick. It doesn't matter if you go to Stormfront Gate. I think that's what the grace is called. Stormfront Great, what the hell? Stormfront Gate. There you go. And you go to the Sword Monument, you learn about Godrick and Melania. It's just like, he's one of the biggest characters that you will learn about early on. And it's supposed to be like that because he's one of the first major bosses you're supposed to fight. But there's something off about him. People talk about him as a demigod, but they like bash on him so much all the time. Bash, bash, bash. Ken of Height. We hear stories about Melania beating him. We hear about him running away from Radon, and we hear about how Vari talks about him. We hear about Sir Gideon Ofnir talks about him. So it's just a bunch of just random comments about a demigod. Right? We rarely ever hear that about a demigod. And if it is about a demigod, it's never questioning their strength or power. It's more questioning about what that person is actually doing. A good example is Mohg. Mohg is the Lord of Blood, and a lot of people are just like, oh, you know, Lord of Blood. Oh, he's kind of crazy. All the blade fingers, you know. Justified. 100% justified when it comes to Mohg. But no one really ever questions his power. They just call him insane or something like that. But when it comes to Godrick, they question, oh, his legitimate, like his bloodline legitimate? Is he actually a demigod? Is he all this? But he is not exactly a demigod, but he has he has like divinity blood in him. His blood is very diluted. You learn this later on through Enya, I think her name is, the finger reader at the Round Table Hold. But for lack of better words, he's the weakest of all the demigods. And to compensate for that, he grafts limbs on them. And from what I know, most of these limbs are actually from Tarnished. So many of the Tarnished actually get grafted by Godrick and his, like, you know, his people, whoever do the grafting. But basically, he grafts these limbs onto his body. And one of these limbs, which I'm pretty sure if you played Elden Ring before, Elden Ring's been out for a while, is actually a dragon head, which is honestly pretty cool. Although when you really think about it, like his ancestors, if he is connected to Godwyn and stuff like that, secondly, he grafted the wrong dragon head on him. Not the right one, but that's a little bit for a different story. But deep down, we all know that he's a coward, insecure, and just simply desperate. The biggest thing you can choose from this is that his character overall, how people view him, and then when you fight him, he's always talking about kneeling, commanding thee, and all that stuff. You don't have like, it's not like Radon or anyone else. Like, you don't hear that type of stuff from someone who actually has the strength to do so. But when you see his story, you realize that the truth is that he is no king, no lord, no true demigod like he proclaims, but he's more of a small interpretation of what actually he wanted to be. He's a coward. He's a warning to us to not follow in his ways. He's a warning to us that he is not deserving of what anything, like, he's not deserving of anything he is proclaimed to, which means that this relates back to my Godfrey Elden Ring lesson video, that strength is earned. He has not earned any of that. Another thing that adds on to this, which I'm gonna add this piece of evidence here, and I'm gonna refer back to it when I need to, is actually that he's escaped the capital with the women and children using a mimic spell. It was just insane. I really don't know how that really happened. I'm pretty sure from what I know, from the lore story, I'm pretty sure he escaped the capital with the mimic spell and among women and children. I think Kenneth Haidt said that, but I'm not too sure. But it's crazy. Like, when you really think about it, he really is the biggest coward out there. But that's who Godrick is. Ladies and gents, I can't stress enough that rogue energy is really, really good. And also, like in the name implies, it gives you a sense of energy, especially when you're gaming. And I said this time and time before, Night Rain, Elden Ring Night Rain is about to come out. Highly recommend to get you a tub of rogue energy to be your sidekick and your companion when y'all are getting beat by these bosses, because I already know I am. So highly recommend you get 5% off by using my code, just like it is on screen now, and everything else will be self-explanatory. When you taste that, it'll be straight energy and everything you can imagine, especially when defeating those bosses in Elden Ring. But now we're going to go into the next category, which is lessons to avoid. This is going to talk about Godrick's mindset. And this leads to many different qualities and traits that you should not have, but also it could be interpreted in many different ways. So we're going to talk about it as we go. But the first one I have on my notes here is that desperation dresses as power. And that's really is. I think Godrick is the most desperate person in Elden Ring. And desperate, there's different forms of desperate. Obviously, desperate, like how Melania was fighting Radon, and she wanted to fulfill the vow. If you played the DLC, you know what I'm talking about. But she wanted to fulfill the vow, and she gave up her pride as a swordsman and a warrior to match Radon by releasing the Scarlet Rot. That's not the desperate I'm talking about. Melania being desperate is completely different from Godrick's desperate. And he dresses the desperation as power. And everyone around him knows this, but obviously no one's strong enough, and whoever is strong enough just simply doesn't care to go after him. The only person that really cares to actually go after him is us. But let's talk about how Godrick isn't strong, he's still strength. And that's what it is too. Like, you never see him go on no training arc like, oh, I need to improve my skill set, or study like how the Royal Lucarians do, and like they study this magic or something like that, or things like just different from everyone else, right? He doesn't go on his training arc. He doesn't go on his, Goku hibernation chamber. Nah, he literally chops people limbs off, put it on themselves, and I'm pretty sure he's a descendant of like the royal family and like Marika, so he has like the basically, what is the shaman like blood and body to like meld things together, and his skin and stuff like that, which is really disgusting process when you really think about it. But yeah, he grafts people on them and he steals their strength. It's basically like plagiarism. I watched an anime one time where this guy had the ability to plagiarize. I think it was a basketball anime, but I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure he was able to steal like people's abilities and they can't use them no more. Very similar to Godrick grafting. Godrick basically just steals powers from other people and grafts it on himself and then calls it his own power. And when you really think about it, like, he's the weakest because he just steals power, yet when the power he steals, he never really truly refines it or like actually try to make it his own. He just kind of steals it and then goes to the next person to steal, which is crazy when you really think about it. But I have on here, which comes also from the mindset of Sir Onzabach, which is real power comes from mastery, not shortcuts. 100% true. Like, that's the biggest difference. And when you talk about in real life, in business or life, grasping at quick fixes, for example, taking shortcuts. Obviously, some shortcuts are going to be very acceptable depending on the situation, but when I mean by shortcuts, I mean by cutting corners, copying, stealing, faking. All this stuff leads to just straight disaster and not long-lasting success. And obviously, it comes down to your reputation. I think reputation you shouldn't care about it too much, but there's a difference between a reputation that are like, hey, you know, you made a few mistakes, or hey, you like legit did some crazy things. For example, in my field, when it comes to content creating about business and stuff like that, I actually try to talk about my own businesses. I try to talk about how to improve your business, and I have business development 101. But you also have people not in my field, but you have people that's like gives the bad image of people like me who actually try to teach business without a paycheck or a paywall. I don't have no course. But basically, you have all these like alpha males and these like fake gurus selling you the dream, and that's what it is, selling you the dream. And that just goes to show that desperation can be hid in many different forms. And Godrick is a good example of that. And, you know, when people, like, find that in real life, they find themselves in a weird category where everyone knows. And, you know, eventually they fall. Everyone else is, like, just, like, looking at them. It's like, yeah, you don't deserve of that. You truly are a monster when you really look at it. It doesn't matter what side you look at. The inside, the outside, doesn't matter what coin you flip. You are truly a monster to prey on innocents and people who have nothing to do against you. And like, you sell these false promises of power and stuff like that. But the second one I have here for Godrick's mindset is insecurity. Pretty self-explanatory. Insecurity. Like, he grafts a dragon to match your measure, but I would assume that he was already going to graft the dragon on himself. Like, he already had the dragon before us. So he was planning to graft that dragon onto himself already. And for many reasons, like, we can think of. And we obviously have to imply it and infer it. But honestly, when you really think about it, it would be like to impress and to look stronger than what he actually is. And even when he did graft the dragon, it really didn't even matter to begin with. But it also begs the question is, I don't know if this is going to be a lore question or anything like that, but it begs the question, like, if you push the graphing process to the extreme, which I think Godrick was doing, but he was on the borderline of, like, almost pushing it to the extreme. I don't know how far graphing goes. We actually learn very little of the graphing process rather than what it is. Like, we know what it is, but we don't actually know what it is at the same time, unless that's part of the lore I miss. But I really wonder if the more you graph, the less you become human. And I guess it does apply to Godrick to some degree, because that's what I have in my notes. But when I really think about it, it can swing both ways. But how I see that, he became less human. Like, can you really look at him and be like, oh yeah, that's a human? Like, no, I guess. But you also could talk about the other side where he was more human because he was cowardly and insecure and all those other stuff, which are human traits. So it really just depends. I guess physically he was not a human. He was like a monstrosity, a freaking Frankenstein. So that really is, you know, overcompensating and insecurity. But right here, I also have on my notes is that if you keep adding more without building up your core, you will lose yourself, which is 100% true. And then another mindset tip I have about the insecurity is just to build skills, build character, not image. And obviously don't leech off whatever is remaining. I'm pretty sure my children will have to face this problem later on. But, you know, when you have like a record or some type of legacy and building of some type of history before where success was a part of that history, family history especially, it's kind of hard for the descendants to like push past that limit. But there are times where you can become more than what your family image was. And Godrick finds himself in that trap where he's so addicted to the golden lineage and it's the ideas and the image of the golden lineage that we never even know who Godrick was before that, or if there was even a Godrick that was not Godrick the Golden or Godrick the Graphic. So very, very interesting to think about. But I highly recommend to build your own character and build skills and do your own thing. When you do your own thing, you find yourself and you build character, and you don't fall into that whole family legacy trap. Obviously, we're gonna talk about the next category when it comes to his mindset, which is his coward. He's a coward. His cowardice. Godrick hides behind his title. He skipped the capital with the Mimic's Veil. He runs away and hide behind walls and behind these soldiers and even runs away from Radon. Radon was shooting meteors at his castle. I'm pretty sure you look at the architecture of this castle, you can see that he got shot by a bunch of meteors, which is crazy. I can't imagine. I'm pretty sure. Honestly, I'm very surprised that he didn't Radon just didn't they had the whole castle and just whoop and threw it. But I'm pretty sure he had many different reasons, and I'm pretty sure one of the main reasons that it was Stormveil Castle. It was under Godfrey for a time, so I'm pretty sure he didn't want to do all that. But still, I'm surprised Godrick did not do that. He didn't just pick up the freaking castle and just launched it, because he did hold the stars in his place. So I'm pretty sure a castle is light work for him. But let's get back on point with Godrick. He ran away, and he even insulted Melania, got defeated. I'm pretty sure it was pretty easy too. And then he proceeds to beg for forgiveness, and how Ken of Sight says it, I think liquor boot or something like that. So that's crazy, really crazy when you think about it. So he's the biggest coward possible, and that's one of his defining traits of his character. So pretty self-explanatory to avoid this. The emotional lesson I have here is to be honest about your fears and don't let them shape your identity. Pretty self-explanatory, and cowardice can spawn in many different forms, from anger, begging, controlling others, and just a fear of, many different fears, whether that fear be failure or anything like that. So remember to be honest about your fears, and you usually won't run into any type of cowardice. And if you do, cowardice is oftentimes can be used to your own advantage. But there's a difference between being cowarded, there's a difference between having cowardice traits to whatever it may be, whether that be combat or something like that. If you're doing mixed martial arts, so you're in this UFC fight, you're doing MMA or whatever it is, then, or you're being more strategic about how you're being cautious and strategic, or whatever that may be in terms of business or anything like that, or school too. There's a difference between that and cowardice, how Godrick does it. So try to avoid the whole cowardice how Godrick did it. Another thing is that what I have here is that he was inflicting pain to not only steal power from others and still basically ruin other people's lives, but also to feel strong. Godrick basically grasps people, and these people are around him suffer. And that's no way to live a life, no matter how bad or evil it is. Even the most evil people in Elden Ring don't do that. And the reason why they don't do that is because they don't need to. But when you inflict pain on others, it hurts people. Self-explanatory. Oh my god, it hurts people. But you'll be surprised that when you really think about the bigger picture of Godrick, he has no one around him. Because all those people are getting hurt, either dead already from Godrick or anything like that. He doesn't even have his knights from the capital in his castle. He doesn't have them. So that just goes to show that how much pain he has inflicted on others. And, I wouldn't be surprised if there was some type of rebellion, how with I forgot what the Black Knights from the DLC, the Black Knights under Mesmer tried to rebelled against them. I wouldn't be surprised if that happened with Godrick. So it just goes to show that toxic leaders will drain and destroy everything, and destroy whatever you're associated with, and you have to be very, very beware of these toxic leaders. Remember, that also goes to you when it comes to business. Remember that you do not want to follow this lead into leadership like how Godrick did it. But also, don't build your life by stepping on others. That's not strength. That's weakness, pretending to have a sense of dominance. Just pretending to have a sense of dominance. So remember that, remember that, remember that. Another thing I have for his mindset is that he's clinging to power instead of growing. Godrick, by the time we meet him, he's so desperate that his desperation just really is just clinging to all the power he has. He even has the kite and sellswords in the Limgrave because he's losing power. He doesn't have the power to hold Limgrave no more. And even his soldiers are low-key they're in strategic positions, but they're also you rarely ever see them. And when you see them, you see them a lot of time, but when you get farther away from Stormveil, you see them less, way less. And even when you really think about what the positions of the Godrick soldiers, the ones from the capital, are at, where they're at, they're just holding strategic choke points, and that's it. They're really not, the other castles they had Obviously, you had the one Kenneth Heights fort that got taken over by the Blood Commander Godrick Knight, the one that's serving Mohg now, which is crazy to imply that like one of the Godrick soldiers, commanders, I guess when you really think about it, betrayed him and served Mohg, which is insane. And then the other one is what's that companion or not companion, that NPC's name? Dang, the one in the Weeping Palencia. I forgot what that fort is in that castle. Castle Morn. I think it's called Castle Morn. Yeah, Castle Morn's been overrun by demi-humans, so Godrick's power is not what it once used to be. So, and even when it was the height of his prime power, I'm pretty sure it was nothing too crazy. Not like how Radahn was. Basically, I'm pretty sure Radahn was holding all of Caelid, and then it got Melania and Mikola having the whole Halletry, which is not as big as everything else, but it's just as powerful or even stronger. So it really just goes to show where everything has fallen to. And it just goes to show that don't cling to titles and just try to grow your value and evolve. And obviously everything is supposed to come down eventually, but you never want to come down like how Godrick does it. So remember that he is just simply bitter. And he's chasing power, and you never want to be like that. You always want to be worthy of the power you gain, and also to remember when it comes to power that you have to humble and lower yourself in terms of anything when it comes to leadership or actually anything else in terms of business. That you have to lower yourself and humble yourself in order to attain power. Well, let's talk about the huge next category, which is not the next, like we're done with the whole mindset thing, but is how to break this pattern of the mindset when it comes to Godrick, and especially when it comes to his mindset, which is just to be more self-aware of yourself and do not fall into that trap. And if you are in that trap, self-awareness can help. And when I mean by trap, I mean family legacy. He falls into that trap, but family legacy doesn't amount to all the pain he has inflicted on other people. So just goes to show that, yeah, you have to ask yourself, like, am I doing this to grow or to hide my fear, hide my anger, hide my lack of power, to hide, the things I've done, my closets, like the things in my closets, that I don't want no one to know about. Just remember, self-awareness can help you prevail in many different categories, and this is one of the one, especially when it comes to cowardice. So remember that. Nothing against feedback. Surround your people who tell you the truth and that actually care for you. As I said before, Godrick has no one around him, and that's the biggest weakness possible. Melania and Mikola had each other, also the Halletry. Obviously, Halletry was not connected as before, and Mikola has this problem too, but Mikola's a little different. Mikola's a lot more strategic, and he had Radahn, and I believe Radahn actually did want to become the Lord, so Mikola's a lot different. But even when you think about other people, a great example will be Ranni. Ranni has Blythe and EG and you at the Tarnish, and even Celavis, but we don't talk about Celavis. Celavis is hot dog water and Pedia and all that lore theory stuff. But, even when you think about Ranni, like, there's a bunch of things about Ranni, and even I've been learning more about Ranni lately, that Ranni and Melania, what the hell? Ranni and Melina were actually one person entirely, split personalities, Empyrean status, how they have those whole split personalities type thing. The good example for Melania is Millicent, and then Saint Trina and Mikola, and then when it comes to Marika is Radagon. So really interesting to think about. That's just a separate theory entirely that I have learned from somebody, a smaller YouTuber. I forgot his name, but he made a very good lore video on that. But another thing to break the whole Godrick pattern, to like not fall into what he did, is to let go of your ego. He's very egotistical, so don't hold on to ego. Ego? Yeah. I'm saying like the bird ego, but being egotistical is like one of the like worst things you can do for your whole life, and have the worst traits you can have for your whole life. It just really does ruin things. Now, being egotistical about certain things, like prideful about certain things, is all right. You have to play your cards very carefully, because at the end of the day, we're humans, so we're gonna have some sort of pride, but you have to play your cards very carefully. And when I mean very carefully, you have to play them very carefully. But last thing I have here for the break the mindset is to understand that mastery and actually being skillful at something, this really does break this mode. It breaks this mode. If he was just more passionate about his craft, if he just actually learned how to become stronger without graphing, Godrick would be a completely different person. And just as simple as that. That also applies to real life in many different forms. A lot of people go for the shortcut. You never want to go for the shortcut, and most of the time the shortcut is a false facade, it's a fugazi, it's a selling the dream, like how I said with those alpha males and those fake gurus that are selling the dream to you. Like, I just can't get past that. People will always take the shortcut, and Godrick took the shortcut, and then guess what he did? He fell into that whole insecure thought of the fugazi, the fake dream, and lost in many different forms. And it doesn't matter how you look at it, reputation, who he was, and everything like that. He simply lost. And now we're going to talk about how Godrick connects to business. And these are very loose claims because Godrick's business is, lack for a better word, not there. No connections or traits. But we do have bad leadership traits, which is what we're going to talk about. It's clear to me that his leadership is very divided. When I mean divided, it's like, let's think about his soldiers. All his soldiers from the capital, not a single one inside the castle. We have ones in front of the castle, and then we have ones scattered between the lands between. But you would think that his first original company of battalion, knights, whatever you want to call them, his army basically would be in his castle, his garrison. But no, not one. We don't see no commander. We don't see anything like that. All we get is a giant in front of his boss door, and we get, like, you know, these tough banished knights. But sure, we get a crucible knight, which is interesting. But the crucible knight is like the most dog water position ever. So it's like, I'm pretty sure Godrick doesn't even know that crucible knight is there. I don't even know why that crucible knight is there in the first place. Maybe he's there to be hired, but maybe he is because of the golden lineage. But that crucible knight is in the most weird position ever, and he's strong too. Especially early on if you try to fight him. So it's just like, wow, like I don't really know. His no sense of leadership and no sense of everything. And even, let's think about the Crucible Knight once again. Let's think about the position the Crucible Knight is. It was such poor leadership and commanding by Godrick. If he actually knew that Crucible Knight was there, to put that Crucible Knight in the most dog-water position ever. That just goes for business, life, college, doesn't matter. Strategic thinking as well. It's like, what made him think that these Crucible Knights, very strong and all, are just put in these random positions? But my theory when it comes to the Crucible Knights is that actually the Crucible Knights actually try to fight them, try to kill Godrick or some way, some form. Because let's think about it. Outside the Stormvale Castle, they have the Everjail or the Evergall, whatever you were going to call them, the prisons for the spirits or something like that. I'm not really too sure. But basically the Evergalls. There's a Crucible Knight in that Evergall, and then you have the other Crucible Knight that's in the general area in the most random position ever. So it just goes to show that, like, I'm pretty sure they were trying to fight them. I'm not really too sure though. Maybe it's just me talking. But yeah, when you really think about his soldiers' position and stuff like that, really bad leadership decisions, and it just goes to show the mistrust and the insecurity that comes from his own army. His own army is still loyal because, you know, the Golden Order and the Golden Lineage, but it really just goes to show that Godrick has, when he comes to leadership towards his army, he just really threw them out like trash. He threw out the piece of wrapper and it's like, whoop, yep. But another thing when it comes to business is that Godrick is just, lack for a better words, has the traits of like a person you don't want to follow. So when it comes to all these things, let's think about your own boss, for example, and you're very, like, you can do this through analyzing somebody and actually understanding the actions they do. Look at the actions they do, and if they follow similar pattern to Godrick, oh, you're in a real wrong position, especially when it comes to your boss or anything like that. Of course, sometimes you gotta bite the bullet and be like, you know, I need the job for the check or whatever. 100% fine. Just be more strategic about your actions and realize your boss is, well, falls on the same line of Godrick. So that's just not a good correlation or comparison ever. So remember that, remember that, remember that. Another thing is that you always have a chance to grow and to evolve past the reputation you gain. So even if you do fall into this category or anything like that, there'll always be some sense of redemption. So remember that redemption is always will be offered to you, especially under the Lord Jesus Christ. So just remember that. What's some other things I could talk about is that he fakes confidence. Godrick fakes confidence, and he really doesn't really have a purpose. What is Godrick trying to do? He's trying to graft himself for more power, but what he's going to do after that? He barely even has an army. So even if he was going to take over more territory, you have no army. And even the areas around him, he could take it over when you really think about it. But I don't know, he could go up to Lerenia. Lerenia's in chaos. So I'm pretty sure he can move forces up there easily too, and he can go down south to Weeping Palencia and control that area too. He supposedly controlled it through Castle Morn, but Castle Morn's not what it used to be. And even like the people that are holding the bridge, it's interesting to really think about, because the bridge to Castle Morn is being blocked off by Godrick soldiers. But if the Godrick, like, there's dead bodies on that path, and there's dead bodies near that bridge that are Godrick soldiers. So I'm not really sure what the implications are there, but I'm pretty sure if you're just Godrick soldier, especially that guy on that ballista, he's just kind of sitting here, and then he's just like, yeah, I'm gonna guard this bridge. And then if you were to look behind him, just for a little bit, just look behind him, you'll see Godrick soldiers dead on the floor, and the castle's commander, I forgot his name, Edgar. Castle's commander Edgar, daughter, which is, I forgot her name. Enya? No, not Enya. Irina? I think Irina is her daughter. But yeah, he would just see a blind girl behind him and a bunch of freaking dead bodies. It's like, wow, I really wonder what happened over there. Like, bro, why wouldn't you just go check there? But it's very suspicious, you know, so I don't know what the implications are there, but I wouldn't be surprised if they rebelled against Godrick as well. Just like that Blood Commander, at the Kenneth Heights fort. So it just really shows that Godrick doesn't have the trust of his men or anything no more. And it makes sense. Look at all the traits and the mindset he produces. It just really goes to show that he's a coward in many ways possible. And, you know, when it comes to business, you don't need that in business or leadership or anything like that. So beware when it comes to Godrick. But let's talk about some final thoughts. Do I think Godrick is a villain? Yes. He freaking grafted everybody. He even grafted, what's her name? The spirit tuning girl. Oh, I forgot her name. Yeah, I forgot her name, but the spirit tuning girl, the one you meet at the Stormveil Shack, and the one that goes to the Round Table Hole, and you do spirit tuning with her. But yeah, Rodrika. Yeah, she killed her, like, whole, like, I don't know what it was actually, but she killed her whole, like, army, not army, but it was like more like her peoples, killed her peoples, that's what someone called it, killed her peoples, killed all the people that were traveling with her, travel companions and stuff like that. It's crazy when you really think about it. He's fake confidence, he faked confidence, he was a coward, he skipped the capital, all that stuff. Very, very self-explanatory. Do not follow in his footsteps. It's as simple as that. But if I were to tell you, like, some bonus ideas, like when it comes to Godrick, is that Godrick is an interesting character. Like, he really is. I was talking about this a little earlier. This is beyond the point of, like, hey, we're talking about real life now, or, you know, how it connects. We're beyond that. That's done. The main thing you want to look at when it comes to Godrick is his mindset, and that's really it. I made some connections to business, I made some connections to anything else, but Godrick is just mainly his mindset is what you want to look at, because everything else is just like trash, whatever, like how they described him in Elden Ring. So, but some bonus ideas is that Godrick's lineage might not be what it is. And there's a bunch of things that when it comes to Godrick that it really just divides the idea. Such as Godfrey. Godfrey is also a good example. Like, Godfrey and Godrick are basically the same model and everything like that, but I don't know what the implications are there. Because you might think it's just cheap design, but it could be more. Maybe it is cheap design, but maybe it could be more. You never know. I wouldn't put it past them. But it's not our first idea of like, hey, somebody has transported their spirit. Maybe Godfrey is actually Godrick transported his spirit out of the Evergel or something like that, and that's just a body of a husk, you know. Like in Dark Souls 2, there's this guy who was like a mercenary warrior, and he got his head chopped off, and he's now in that freaking that fog swamp area, whatever it may be. I forgot what it was called, but yeah, he's like, he has his body walking around with these two axes from Dark Souls 2. Another example in Elden Ring was actually Selen. Selen is able to physically like put projections out of herself, and you know, the Empyreans are a good example. Godrick and Godfrey are actually from that lineage of Godfrey and Godwyn, so I wouldn't be surprised if they have some type of ability to project himself or something like that. So who knows? We just don't have enough information, but it's interesting to think about. My theory when it comes to Godrick is that Godrick is actually Godfrey. There it is. Now my lines of thinking is kind of like falls into the whole Selen and the whole Empyrean thing, but she's not Empyrean, but he has divinity blood in him. But who knows? Maybe it is Godrick though, and maybe it's just cheap design by the little few cracks in Elden Ring. But yeah, that's just it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know I'm all blinged out, I'm going crazy today. I actually was gonna wear nothing, but you know, I had to go jewelry shopping today. I'm pretty cool. This is what I'm gonna take. Obviously not with the shirt. I'm probably gonna change the shirt out, change the whole outfit. I'm just trying to be relaxed, or maybe I'll put a hoodie over and stuff like that, who knows. But I'm actually going jewelry shopping today, and that's why I'm looking like this. I'm recording a video for my friend's YouTube channel, so it's a whole vlog thing, and he wants me to come blinged out. He also is going to be blinged out. He runs a whole business, a management business, so it's really cool. Maybe I'll get him on for one of these vlog videos and get a whole interview. I wouldn't be surprised if he would like the idea, but you know, all these things are happening today. I'm gonna have a great time. I hope you guys have a great time today. If you guys are a great night, good morning, great night, whatever it may be for you guys. And I hope you guys had an amazing day or amazing night. God bless, and you know, thank you guys for the support. And I hope you guys have a fantastic time in this Elden Ring lessons video. Let's talk about this now. Godrick's lineage is really strong. That's why Godrick is the way he is. But who is Godrick's lineage? What really makes Godrick act like this? Why does he always talk about the lands raised of gold, and you know, all these lion imagery and everywhere, and all these axe imagery everywhere? You want to learn that? Watch this video here about Godfrey. Morgott, the Omen King.
Morgott, last of all kings.
He is the ruler of the capital and basically in the storyline of Elden Ring when we get into the lands between. So he's a very interesting character. It just goes to show that his story and character is one of the few bright sides of Elden Ring, and one of the more core story implications, and also lore implications, but also in terms of mindset, identity, and the lessons we can learn from Elden Ring. Just as like all Godfrey children are, Godfrey's children is by far the pinnacle of a lot of Elden Ring stories and lessons you can learn. But Morgott. My personal opinion about Morgott is that he's brilliant. I wish we got more of his story. I wish we got more of his character and be able to understand him. He's one of the main antagonists or main opponents. I wouldn't say antagonists, but he's one of the main opponents you will face in the game. Countless times. I believe you can have 3 fights with him total, and then even in the new Elden Ring Night Reign, he's in there as well. So it just goes to show that he's a prominent character when it comes to the Elden Ring franchise. And his name is iconic because, like I said, he plays a big part in our story, but also plays a big part into the lessons we can learn. And we're going to start with who Morgott is. Morgott, like I said, is the Omen King, last of all kings, ruler of Lendel, the royal capital. But he is also way more than that. He is one of the few characters that interact with majority of the story, unlike most characters. Unlike most characters, they usually fit into one category of the story, and then usually you meet them later on, or they're just part of that story. Whether that be the Star Surge conflict, or the rebellion of Ryu, Lucaria, and the Carians, or whether that be the March of Gold when they're marching into Liurnia during the Liurnia Wars. You kind of just have those events there, and people interact with those individual events. Now, there's some people who do interact with all of them, but those are the major characters, and Morgott is a major character, yes, but he interacts way more in the shadows than you think. What does these events got to do with Morgott? Not those events that I just stated, but what you got to really look at is what the whole system, the Golden Order, the Erd Tree, and everything has to come in place. For example, he's an Omen. Let's get that out the door. He's an Omen, which means he was shunned, feared, and since he was royalty, blood royalty, the royalty, he was kept alive and, you know, didn't have his horns cut off and stuff like that. But he was in the sewers. And if you played Elden Ring, you know the sewers sucks. The sewers are disastrous. But he was in the sewers. Not only that, he has been in many different huge events, such as both of the Siege of the Capital, such as the Alliance of the Sovereign Alliance when the Shattering happened. And that just goes to show how many events Morgott has been here for. He was probably there when the Ancient Dragons attacked the capital as well. So, just many different events, he was in the shadows, he was there. Now, how he came into this role of being, you know, in the shadows, an assassin, for lack of a better words, a commander of the Night Cavalry, we do not know. A lot of people theorize that Marika brought her son up, and let's talk about that for a quick minute. That he was born of Godfrey. He's the son of Godfrey, so that just goes to show his strength, but also that he's been around for a very, very long time. Guarantee you he's been around for a couple eras of Erdtree, whether that be way before when the Erdtree was not really a thing, because you know the Golden Order became it was the Golden Order when the Golden Order wasn't really a thing, because when the Golden Order became a thing through the plucking of the rune of death, basically the destined death, so all her children can be immortal, for lack of a better words. But that just goes to show that there's a lot of events that he's been a part of. And when he was brought up into be the commander of the Knights Cavalry, don't know. When Morgott, the Fell Omen came, which is his other persona, that it really does suck, I'm not gonna lie. Not his character or anything like that, but the name, like, Morgott and Morgott is really like, and he doesn't even change his outfit at all, so it's like, it's really weird. But I guess how it's played out is like, all these characters, for example, the ones that have like alternative personas and stuff like that, not like in terms of it being an Empyrean or whatever, but like being like identity, they usually have very little interaction with their main persona. So Morgott has less interactions than it does with Morgott, so people think Morgott is his own thing. But let's also talk about a few other events he's been part of and other achievements he has reached. For example, he was able to create the Sovereign Alliance. I'm pretty sure he was the head of this alliance, because when you get his introduction cutscene, I'll show it on screen now, he basically showcases that everybody, all this, all that, saying they're traitors or whatnot. So, but also that he was able to fight Radahn. What Radahn was this? Not sure. We can assume that this is a transitional period between the DLC Radahn to the Star Scourge Radahn, minus the rot for the Star Scourge Radahn, and minus the whole ritual Mohg thing that was going on there, that he was able to use blood flame and stuff. So minus that, and plus that was more like an interpretation how Miquella saw him, but that's the best we can get of Radahn. So these two things overlap, so I think it's like right in the middle. I think it was after the Star Scourge, so after the Star Scourge, but he was still in his early phases of the Shattering War, so I'm pretty sure he still kept some identity of what came before. So it's pretty insane that he was able to beat Radahn, or at least come to a standstill where Radahn had to retreat from the capital and take his losses and head back to Caelid. So it just goes to show that he is really, really prominent. And another thing he's proud of is that he hunt down many of the tarnished that seek lordship, that seek to become Elden Lord. So he has all these nice cavalry taking these people out. He goes as Morgott to kill all these tarnished and stop all these prominent champions. And keep in mind, he did this for the whole timeline. I'm pretty sure he did this for like majority of the Golden Order, not when he was just the ruler of the capital. I'm pretty sure he did that way before he was employed by his mom to do that, go kill them, seek them out. But keep in mind, many of these people were given runes and grace by Marika, and these grace, you know, you get the in-game items, the Marika grace, the Marika rune, all that stuff. And it's just crazy that Morgott was able to take him out. Obviously, he's the son of Godfrey and the son of Marika, so yeah, that's probably, it doesn't make, like, you know, like it's not that crazy, but it really is, because let's be honest here, these are seasoned warriors, you know, seasoned warriors that would give us a challenge. Let's talk about a few things before we get into all the other things. I know this is very long, but you know, we have to get into the other few things. Morgott was treated very poorly by the Golden Order, but yet he's still very loyal to the Golden Order, and the Erdtree protects it with all his might, everything possible, for countless years and times. Who knows how long it's been. Another thing, the second, that is that he's a prominent son of Godfrey and Marika, which means he has the power and the strength to back up that name and title, even though he doesn't really have a title besides later on when he becomes the last king of Leyndell, royal capital. And the third one is that he's a prominent character when it comes to ultimate loyalty in the face of rejection, but also defender of what he believed in and the kingdom that he was born into, but yet rejected. That in itself was prominent in his character, because let's think about it, he's an omen. He wasn't birthed by a king. He has king's blood, he has royalty blood, but he was an omen, so he was a king by merit. which means he was able to prove himself to that title and earn that title more than anything that was possible. But that who is Morgott is. Morgott's an expansive character, so I'm pretty sure I missed a few things, but that's who Morgott is. But let's talk about the mindset lessons you can learn from Morgott. The first one is self-discipline over recognition. And what I mean by self-discipline over recognition is that Morgott never sought fame, praise, or anything like that. Now you'd be thinking like, hey, you know, what do you mean by that? You know, some people seek fame and recognition, such as Godrick, such as Radahn. Now, Radon's a little different. He kind of like Radon's a little different because he was kind of like molded into it, but he still has a reputation and it still has a symbol to live up to. So same thing with him. He worked in the shadows protecting the Golden Order, even when it despised him, even though he was an omen, even though his mother shunned him away. Now his father was a little different, but could Godfrey really do something? We don't really know. He was really committed to this thing. And that was the first real life takeaway, that he was really committed to his principles, even when he was unrecognized. And that was integrity. Sometimes you need integrity when it comes to a few things. Sometimes you need to commit, even though no one's going to give you the recognition you need. Sometimes you need to put in the work in order to get something you want just for yourself. Being selfish. Yes. Sometimes you can be selfish and sometimes you can be selfless. Both are the same thing. People like to say, oh, they're two different things, which they are, but they're two sides of the same coin. It really does not matter. They're both the same thing when it comes to a context like this. But being committed allows you to be more in your purpose, but also allows you to have strength in silence. And strength in silence is when things really pop off, when they need you at most, whatever that may be, for people you care about, for the people that care about you, for whatever that may be, for the work and the craft you're in. And when you need it, when you need strength the most, strength and silence will always be there. Let's take Morgott, for example. He was able to defend the capital, not once, but twice. He was able to prolong the shattering and stop the shattering for a decent amount of time with his sovereign alliance. So he was able to have a strength, even though he was an omen, even though he was shunned by the Golden Lord, and even though his siblings are kind of like on the opposite end and were supposed to be stronger than him. That just goes to show that self-discipline over recognition is very powerful. The second thing we want to talk about is overcoming rejection and shame. Now, he never really fully overcome rejection, but he did use it as fuel. So he was almost there. His mindset, his character kind of stopped him from thinking about, hey, you know, he never thought of himself as worthy. So that's what really broke his mold. But he was able to understand that, you know, this rejection and shame can be used as fuel. He even like humbles himself with his rags. You know, his rags was like, he kept his rags from the sewers, but he was able to use that as fuel. I'm pretty sure he had the power and the anger to back up his fuel, and then, you know, eventually he was able to do all these amazing feats. As, for example, all these things we talked about before, but also that he was able to turn and block out the flame of chaos. So he was able to, you know, hold down the fort, hold down the defenses of the flame of chaos, along with his brother Mohg, obviously. But he was down there as well, and he was able to play a big part too, in terms of blocking everything like that. For example, you defeat Mohg, you know, you try to open the path to the frame, the frenzy frame, and then, you know, it's blocked by Morgott, which means you gotta go take out Morgott. And Morgott, you know, it just goes to show that the things he does for everything possible. So he was able to use all his rejections, especially from his mother, and his shame of being an omen to his own benefits, which means he was able to turn pain into power. When it comes to his character, being different doesn't mean less. It means that you're just different on a different path. But also, don't let society label you to define your destiny. And that's what it is too. Despite everything like that, he was able to define his destiny in a very opposite way than any omen was possible, except for Mohg, obviously, but that's his brother, so that's completely different. But, you know, he was able to define himself in the greatest way possible. Last king of Lendel, the royal capital. I don't really know what to say anything else for this category. Then overcoming rejection and shame and using it as a power source is one of the greatest things you can do in this negative persona and this negative context. Third thing is that he was purpose driven, resilience. He had a resilience towards his purpose, and he was purpose driven. A double combination, a two-piece and a soda. It's just simply that he fought many different battles in many different categories, yet his purpose driven and his resilience back them up. And that's what you need as well. Having these habits, these skills, these traits will back you up when you need it most. These doors won't open majority of the time. So there's two ways you can do it. One, have the skills to open the doors to these gateways and to these pathways to unlock these skills and traits. Second, break it down through brute force. Pretty self-explanatory. Now, what we can learn from this is that don't give up just because the outcome isn't guaranteed. Pretty self-explanatory, but you know, this is what a negative context. Even though you're debuffed, even though you're in the negatives, you can still make a redemption arc, you can still pull back, and even when your outcome is not guaranteed, you should always never give up. Second is that loyalty to your values builds unshakable confidence, but also a humble experience of what it actually means to pursue these values. Morgott is a great example of that. And then lastly, sometimes you need to protect the vision of others you can't see yet. Did Morgott see the vision of the Golden Order? Most likely not. Later on, he probably did. But, you know, he took it into his own hands, was able to protect the vision that eventually became his own vision. Now, that could be debated over lore context, but at the end of the day, was it his own vision? Yes, to a certain degree. Next category we're going to talk about is power and strength. Just like how Godfrey had power and strength, he has as well. He inherited it, but also was able to gain it through many different things, as we talked about before. But it was just more than combat. It was more than combat, just like Godfrey. It was more than combat. He had the mastery of unique abilities. For example, his omen abilities. He was able to channel that. And he was able to use a curved sword that was made of his blood. So very unique mastery there. But he was able to channel being a lord, so lordship. He was able to have lordship. Crazy idea of an omen becoming the king. He was able to do that. His true power in that context was using what was different about him to his own advantage, but also to prevail and allow for a different idea and a different path to come to be. So those things are insanely powerful. And not only that, he was able to master his weakness until it became his own strength. Now, if you fought him before, you would know he's insanely powerful. Be sure to understand that your weaknesses can become your strength. Now, you'll gain new weaknesses through that. But, you know, improvement and development is greatly needed for a long journey, especially in life. Second one is that he was calculated aggression, just calculated aggression. He always had calculated aggression, especially through his Morgott persona. Calculated aggression towards people that would oppose him. He was able to pull a lot of these feats off through calculated aggression. In business or life, calculated aggression will be powerful, especially with intention. When you have powerful intentions behind your calculated aggression, you're able to pull off a power move that will have lasting effect. Having this sort of power allows you to have control in dangerous situations, and dangerous situations will always come around. So having some sort of control over some of them will make you way more stronger and will make you way more of a greater leader, but also be more beneficial for you. Now we're going to talk about another category, which is business. And yes, business connects to Morgott very well. Not only through his lordship, we already talked about this with Godfrey. So if you're interested about what lordship and everything like that could come with business, go check out the Godfrey video. We're going to talk about what exactly is the business that Morgott is running. There's many different things. For example, leadership. We talked about this when it comes to lordship, but also he's able to command a team. That's what I really want to talk about. His Knights Cavalry. He's able to command his team. And this is a pretty effective team. I'm pretty sure they've been around for a very long time. So a very effective team. What can you take from that? That I'm pretty sure these knights are the same knights that he officially recruited, or officially however the process came to be where the Knight Cavalry started. These are the same knights from all the way back then. So experience and longevity of a team can allow you to prevail in many different categories, but also be very effective and strong. So the two things you can take from that is longevity and experience. Those are part of the two things you want to focus on when it comes to a long timeline. Especially when it comes to business, you need to be able to extend that timeline as much as you can and have your team members follow you along, just like the Knights Cavalry. Yeah, Morgott is, well, for lack of a better words, an underdog. Many people who start business are underdogs. So like myself too. I was an underdog too. I was starting basically with my youth martial arts. I was able to use that as funding, all that, whatever that may be, and you know, other things along the way. I have team members and stuff like that, so same thing, just like Morgott, I was able to basically start my own like cavalry. Basically, he was an underdog, and you must understand that underdogs are going to have debuffs. Underdogs are going to be in the negatives. You're going to start from nothing, or you're going to be in the negatives, just like how Morgott was. Understand that. Once you understand that, and you apply some of Morgott's traits, identities, and key habits and key takeaways, you will be able to prevail just like him and myself. And lastly, what I want to talk about when it comes to business is that you do not need to be in the main front line, the main image of the business, in order for it to be successful. Pretty self-explanatory, but a lot of people, when they start a business, especially start on, they think they need to be on the head front. No. A team could be in the head front, an identity could be in the head front, another person could be in the head front, but you do not need to be the main image, the main opposer of that business. Let's talk about the next category, which is few tips to be like Morgott in real life. I have 3 for you for this category, and it's just simply to master the power of silence. Not everything needs to be a reaction. Like I said before, the strength in silence. When you actually need it, when you need it most, it will come and help you. It will be there for you to use. And work in silence. Let your results make the noise. Pretty self-explanatory. Let your work talk for yourself. Let your work show and shine through. Don't let your words basically disregard and demolish what you're building. And second is to stay loyal to your values. Pretty self-explanatory. Morgott stayed loyal to his values, even though he had a kind of a stigma and a kind of a negative aspect to it, but he did stay loyal to it and was able to stay loyal to the Erd Tree. And like I said before, I talked about loyalty countless times in this video. It will help you and it will be provident. So just understand that as well. But the right people or the purpose will recognize you eventually. Like how we are doing this video. We are able to recognize Morgott for the person he was, despite him being an antagonist in our story, or opponent in our story. He was being recognized by us. So yeah. And then lastly, turn weakness into weaponry, and just simply turning your weakness into a strength. Sure, new weaknesses will come, but if you're able to do that, your opponents will not be able to adapt to your old weaknesses and will have to adapt to your new weaknesses. This can be applied to anything possible, especially when it comes to a competitive setting, such as business, such as mixed martial arts, such as anything that requires some type of competition or some type of opponent to face you. Embrace what makes you different and develop skills around your scars.
The shattering ensued, a war that wrought only darkness. The Elden Ring was broken. But by whom? And why? What could the demigods ever hope to win by warring?